Okay, Happy New Year, everybody. We're back with problem of the week number 3, and I'm here today with Greg Philps, who is an expert on the Enterprise DNA Forum and also one of our top participants in the Enterprise DNA Data Challenges. If you haven't seen it yet, I would really commend that you take a look at the interview that he did this week with Sam. He's got some amazing tips for report design that in 15 minutes, I guarantee will improve your report design significantly. I know there are tips that I've begun to adopt in my reports and have really benefited from his approach. So glad to have you with us here today, Greg.
Thanks, Brian.
So I want to jump right into problem of the week number 3. So this one is one that you're going to be leading for us, and you chose to focus on timekeeping. And I'm wondering if you can just talk about what motivated that choice and walk us through the problem kind of start to finish a bit.
Sure. For me, I've been a professional or consultant my entire career. So I've usually been entering time data. Actually, always been entering time data, which I'm sure many of the other people have as well. And as an individual, your remuneration is often tied directly to your entered and approved timesheets. And your wages are based on standard rates or can be subject to collective agreements. As a company, project managers will be using the time data to monitor project progress, while department heads can use the time to manage performance against budgets. Companies also use the time entered to run back-end processes where they apply appropriate hourly rates and to generate invoices. So for the most part, though, the insights derived from the entry of this data are kind of invisible to the employees who entered the time. And I think that is a very common situation for people. So in any event, I thought that timesheets and time data would be a pretty familiar place for people to work and would give us an opportunity to illustrate as well that in Power BI, there are often many ways of doing the same thing. Each way will have its benefits and its limitations in different situations.
I thought it was fascinating that right after you'd chosen that, we got a big question on the forum about time data and calculation of pay periods and using Power BI to sort that into the proper time slot. So it was just an interesting illustration to me of how
no
real
pun
world
intended, but it was a timely post.
It was, and kind of illustrated how real world this problem of the week is. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can kind of jump in, screen share, and walk everybody through what the task for this week's problem is.
Yeah, just I'll do a description just before I go in. The opportunity that we have here is to use two different methods to try and produce total hour and total wage results. We can use just measures, or we can use just calculated columns. Generally, people gravitate towards calculated columns at the beginning of their career using Power BI because it's easier. They can see it. It's a little bit more like Excel. But as we've seen through our own experiences and all the recommendations and forum posts that have been shared on the Enterprise DNA Forum, measures are the way to go as a first option. But I thought this would give us the opportunity to try and do it both ways, and then we could see what the benefits and limitations are of each. So hopefully this exercise will allow everyone to gain some experience in the pluses and minuses of using both measures and calculated columns. And as well, we'll explore a case where simple DAX expressions might not give us the correct totals, and we might have to do some fixing.
Yeah, it's an interesting construct, Greg, because in having done this problem when you developed it, I realized I'd never gone back and actually recreated an analysis solely based on the opposite approach that I'd taken initially. So if I did measures, I'd never gone back and did exactly the same the same way, but with calculated columns. And it really does make for an interesting comparison.
Well, I think that's a very common situation as well. Generally, for me, I would have to say the first time I get something that works, I go along that path. And one of the things that stands out for me is that there are definitely differences between measures and calculated columns. I'm not sure people actually get the opportunity to evaluate it against the same problem, because they do, like I do probably, is once they find something that works, they move ahead.
Right.
So this is an opportunity to do kind of the same thing, but sort of use the same problem with two different approaches. So anyway, yeah, so I have a very small data set that I put together here, and there's 1 year of data, and for every month, for every department and every employee, we're looking to have the total hours calculated by hour type and the total wages calculated taking into account the type of day. As we mentioned, we want to see the solution twice, once with measures and once with calculated columns. And just as a means to make it really obvious that you're not cross-referencing your solutions, we'll ask that all the measures have an M- prefix and all the calculated columns have a CC- prefix, such that we can make sure that what's being referenced is correct. So the description of the time data is such that we have 10 employees that are working between 8 and 12 hours every day in 2020. I know this is not at all reality, but will hopefully be useful as an exercise. Further than that, employee wages are going to be determined either at straight time for up to 8 hours per day on normal work days. The wages will be determined at time and a half for hours beyond 8 hours per day on normal work days or on weekends. And wages will be determined at double time for holidays. And I've used the Canadian standard holidays for 2020. And that's basically the problem. Other than the standard rules, as we've laid out already in previous problems of the week, this is an odd numbered week, so it's DAX week, so no Power Query at all. And I guess the only additional thing is that we realize that there's going to be some benefits and limitations of each of the approaches. And we'd like, along with the submission that you make, to have a short description describing the pros and cons that you found and benefits and limitations of using either all measures or all calculated columns, and which you prefer and why. And hopefully what we will see, as we have in the other problem of the week's solutions, is there will be a variety of submissions. People have differing points of view, and I expect that after the problem is finished and we get the opportunity to read all of the submissions, we'll hopefully gain some insight. So that's about it.
I definitely think so. I mean, in the last round of problem of the week, I think we had 15 different solutions, and they really ranged pretty dramatically in the approach taken, which I think is fascinating. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how broadly the approaches and the views diverge on this one. I generally think in working through this one that if you kind of step through it piece by piece, it's definitely doable. But I wanted to get your thoughts, as we've asked each expert in each iteration of this, kind of what your strategy is if you're working on a problem and you get stuck. Like what are the techniques you use to kind of move yourself along towards solution?
For me, usually when I get stuck is when I try to do too much at one point in time. So my happy place or default things when things get complicated is to break it down into smaller steps, interim steps. So, I mean, if you have a very long DAX formula or whatever, you would put it all into variables and you'd use the return result method. to try and see what the interim steps are, or you could even have measure branching or calculated column branching to record the interim steps that you may have. So I know that this is absolutely not the efficient way to go, but I find it easy for myself to make my thought process easy to understand, and the errors kind of jump out at me. So, and I also try and take the approach that I'm not writing for myself right now, but I'm writing for myself in 6 months when I've forgotten what my train of thought was in developing the report. So that's kind of what I think about each time, is that if I came back to this after 6 months of doing something differently, would I understand what I'm doing? And if not, I'll break it down into smaller steps or add comments or whatever.
That's great advice. That's great advice. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. We've got, I think, a great introduction to this week's problem. Just a reminder to everybody that you don't have to be a member of Enterprise DNA to take advantage of this. We'll post the link in the forum to the problem, and anybody, member or not, is welcome to participate. We hope you will, and looking forward to seeing your solutions and your approaches. So thank you, Greg, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.